If you've never been punched in the face before, I can't trust you. How do you live your whole life and never get into a fight? Like you never had to stand up for yourself or fight for something? Learn to fight. I'm your host, Manny. And yeah, if you've never been in a fight before, I can't trust you. You know, it's like that scene in Fight Club when Brad Pitt says he doesn't want to die without any scars. How do you go your whole life and not get into a fight? Never have to stand up for yourself. Never get punched in the face. Never punched somebody in the face before. Never in your whole life. So that's where martial arts comes into play. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot people don't relate to a lot of these politicians, because it's like they're not real people almost. It's like, they've never been in a fight before. They always give the correct answer. These things it makes you like unrelatable to people. So I think that's one of the reasons why Trump resonates with so many people right now, especially in the MMA world and in the martial arts fight game. Trump, dude gets shot in the ear and he's just pumping his fist saying fight. He's at the UFC fights, and it flashes back to the old days of Pankration, because in Pankration, the Pankration is the oldest martial arts, 2,500 years old. It was actually the first sport in the Olympics in Greece. So they had all these different fighters, wrestlers, boxers, kickboxers, everything. And they would go and they would compete in Pankration, which basically now is MMA, So, but the thing is, in the movie Gladiator, the best fighters, the best gladiators, they became more influential than the politicians. So later on, you would see different people who were politicians want to become the gladiators. So the fight game and the fight world has always been entrenched in all spheres of life. So I think that's one reason why so many people relate to Trump and like Trump. This is a classic thing. The politicians would go to the fights, the gladiator fights, and they would put on these fights to make people happy. But that's a whole nother topic. That's history. Trump is a 9th-degree black belt in Taekwondo. I thought that was pretty wild to see because, pretty much none of the other people, I don't think, have any types of black belts, and they don't even seem tough at all. Like legit, dude is a 9th-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Check it. He got an honorary 9th-degree black belt in Taekwondo back in 2021. Now, some people might say, like, he didn't really earn that belt. He just got it because he's president, and that might be true. But, look at this. Trump in Fedor over at the fights. He actually was one of the people who put on the affliction fights back in the day. He's always been in the fight game. Back in New York, he was putting on all types of boxing events, like some of Mike Tyson's fights. He's always been deep in the fight game. And I think it's important that, the fight game is so real, and these competitive fights are so real because it's an allegory for life. You see a dude get cracked, and the dude put all his effort into this fight, gets knocked out. Same thing in life, same thing in business, same thing in every aspect of life. The fight itself is just a very perfect representation of real life. And when you see guys like Dana White, like Trump, I think a big part of the reason they excel in what they do is because they look at it as a fight, But he's been a long time supporter of the UFC for ridiculously long, ridiculously long. Meanwhile, while guys like John McCain were condemning the UFC and condemning, fight sports, guys like Trump were actually going to the fights. And nowadays, regular people see him like, all right, that dude is a real person like me. He's not just a a robot, you know, so it makes you more relatable. You imagine seeing Biden at a UFC fight? Probably not. You know, you imagine seeing Kamala Harris at a UFC fight? Probably not. These things make, for me, for all my friends, all the people I know, they like to go to fights. They like to do these types of things. They've been in fights themselves. You know, they're real people with real struggles, you know. And I think a lot of politicians trying to be too perfect ends up really backfiring on them in the long run. And that's what we're seeing with Trump. You know, like for example, we look at like JFK. He's just a regular dude. You know what I'm saying? Wasn't a perfect dude by any stretch of imagination. Had multiple, you know, wives or women, and you know, he's doing a lot of crazy stuff. You know, partying and stuff like that. But he's just a regular dude. He's a regular flawed person. You know, trying to be too perfect doesn't get you far. But that's the power of martial arts. When you go and you train and you compete against other people, like my first day in the jiu-jitsu gym on the mat, you know, I thought I was a badass my whole life. As a kid, I'd be like, all right, if someone does something, I'm gonna beat their ass, you know, even if it's an adult, you know, I'm gonna knock them out. I'm just gonna hit them and they're gonna drop, you know. But the reality of it is, if you've never been in a fight, you don't know what you don't know. So I remember the first time I got into a fight, it was just on. I got into a fight just on the block with my buddies. We put on the boxing gloves. We put on the boxing gloves, and we just want to see who's tougher. None of us knew how to fight. We're just winging punches at each other. But you get hit that first time, and you either cower away or you get in there, you know. And through that, I was probably like what 7, 8 years old. You know, just on the block throwing punches. We had a lot of fun just having front yard boxing matches. You know, and then life goes on. You know, and I had my first actual fight where we were taking each other down and doing this crazy stuff. I fought a wrestler. I thought, you know, wrestling was gay. You know what I'm saying? To put it blunt, you know, back in those days, that's how we would say it. I thought wrestling was just a bunch of dudes running around, sweating on each other, doing all this weird stuff. And I actually told the dude that. I was a kid. I was probably like, what, 13. He told him, like, hey, wrestling is gay, blah, blah, blah. He got super pissed. He got super pissed because he dedicated his whole life to it. And that was my first time experiencing wrestling. Dude picked me up, threw me down, slammed me down, ground and pounded me, and I could do nothing about it because I knew nothing about wrestling. Wrestling is like probably the most powerful martial art there is. And when you see Pankration and you see the ancient Greeks and how they mastered wrestling, if you're really good at wrestling, it's just the best way to fight, in my opinion. Striking people is great and knocking people out is great, but if you can pick someone up and slam them down and just control them and overpower them, it's just a different thing. It's the best thing, best martial art for one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat, you know. And the people who in the ancient Greek days, the people, all the like Marcus Aurelius's, a lot of the emperors, a lot of these guys, they were actual fighters themselves. You know, they actually wrestled and they actually did this stuff. So they were just more real. You know, they understood more about the world. In my opinion, if you've never been in a fight before, how can you really understand much about the world? You know, you can't understand as much about the world. You can't understand as much about people and respect people, you know, because martial arts will give you respect real quick. You learn respect real quick. You thought that person was a little nerdy dude. Next thing you know, he's beating your ass, you know. So martial arts definitely teaches you respect. And the power of martial arts, we see guys like Muhammad Ali. You know, Muhammad Ali back in the day was one of the most influential figures in politics, and when it came to the Vietnam War, and he was just one of the most influential figures, period. He had like 10 of the most watched events on TV ever in history. So out of 20. So Muhammad Ali, being a fighter and showing the discipline, the drive, the will, the courage, the strength, these things are aspects and qualities that everybody wants and you should want out of your leaders. That's why if you've never been punched in the face before, I can't trust you, because if you're, especially if you're controlling you know, big groups of people, or you're supposed to lead people, you should have been in there. You should have been in there throwing hands and knowing what it's like to fight verbally or metaphorically and physically. You have to understand and know what it is to be in a fight and to struggle and grind. And I feel like with a lot of these guys trying to be so perfect in politics, they just don't relate to the average man, the average American man, the average person on the grind, the average person who's won and had failures, you know. And that's what someone like Trump represents when he's going to UFC fights and stuff like that. You know, Marcus Aurelius was one of the best wrestlers, fighters of his time, and he, you know, had some of the most profound philosophies. Even still to this day, people read his book, you know, Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, you know, also Plato. You know, Plato's name, plate, actually came from him being a great fighter. Like, they're like, plate, like he's super strong. That's what they would say back in the day. He's like this an incredible Greco-Roman wrestler. Plato, one of the most influential philosophical thinkers of human history. You know, so when you're doing martial arts and you're fighting people one-on-one and you're dedicating yourself to an art, to a craft, especially something as hard as martial arts, regardless of whatever martial art it is, you instantly get points with me because I'm able to trust you more. You've shown a certain level of understanding or a certain level of, like, that dude's a badass. You know what I'm saying? So Trump having that black belt, ninth degree, you know, I don't know if he's gonna be throwing spinning back kicks. I don't know if he's gonna be throwing axe kicks. I don't know if he's gonna be throwing roundhouse kicks and punching people, but I feel like he's better and more likely to be someone who could actually fight their way out of a paper bag if one-on-one, if you needed to fight somebody, you know, and that means a lot to me personally, you know. So I look at stuff like that personally. Just when my day-to-day life, I want to be like, if we had to go in a foxhole and you had to bring three guys, you want those three guys to be badasses. You know, you want those three guys to have been punched in the face before. You don't want somebody who is like never been punched in the face before, never had to struggle before. I want guys like Rocky who have that indomitable spirit. You know, so that's what martial arts is, instills in people, the power of martial arts. You know, everybody wants to be a fighter because these people are just ridiculously power, and they admit power, and they admit courage, and they admit just everything a man would want to be. You know, if you're a champion or a high level fighter, you're going to war. Anything could be going on. Like a fight could be going here, or a fight could be going here. Someone could be playing music here. Someone could be drawing here. Everybody's always gonna look at the fight. Someone could be speaking here. Everyone's gonna always look at the fight, regardless of how important the speech is, right? And that's just, as humans, what we're drawn to. We're drawn to fighting, and we're drawn to that primal side. And martial arts allows you to hone that. I feel like if you want to be your very best self, you have to have some physical combat regularly. You know, you have to be physically strong. Um, you know, the physical strength goes together with the mental strength. Now, you don't need to be super strong physically to be super strong mentally, but as a person having a strong body, a strong mind, a strong spirit, these things go together. And for me, those are the type of people I want around myself. So that's why I say, if you've never been punched in the face, I can't trust you. You've never been choked out before. You never had to choke somebody out or wrestle and do these things. You don't really know who you don't really know yourself that much. You know what I'm saying? And you really don't even know other people, because we're all constantly sizing each other up. You know, we're all constantly sizing each other up. And whenever you actually do martial arts, it gives you a level of respect for everybody, regardless. Even if there's a little teenage kid, right? I can't underestimate that kid. You know how many times I've seen like 16-year-old, 13-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids piece up grown adults in the gym? So many times. And I've been that person myself. So it just gives you a level of respect from everybody. And most problems in the world, most things happen because of a lack of respect. You know, a lot of people are in jail because of they felt disrespected. you know, or they disrespected somebody or something along those lines. So respect, if you respect everybody that you come in contact with, or most people, your life will be so much better. That's like the golden rule is don't disrespect people, you know? So when you do martial arts and you're a martial artist and you have that martial artist program and martial artist prototype martial artist mindset, you respect everybody, you know? And that's why these people like Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Alexander the Great, Miyamoto Musashi, Marcus Aurelius, you know, these different people throughout time, Conor McGregor, these different people throughout time who are warriors, they have so much influence over a lot of things because of who they've proven and shown themselves to be under pressure, under fighting, under war, under stress. You know, that's why Rocky is such a great movie and a powerful movie. And Fight Club is such a great movie because in this day and age where everything's so pussified and soft and you know, just everyone's trying to be so perfect and politically correct, Fight Club is a perfect analogy for what's going on current day. You know, people went so far with the you know, trying to be correct politically with the pronouns and these different things. People are just tired of that, you know, and bringing everybody back to that reality of you respect me, I respect you. I can punch you in the face, you can punch me in my face. I respect you as a man, you respect me as a man. And when you have punched somebody in the face and you've gotten punched in the face before, you get that respect, and you should do that through martial arts. And that's what it's about, you know. And that's why you should learn to fight. And Trump getting that black belt, 9th degree black belt, I think that's pretty cool. Peace out. Learn to fight.